You spend money on supplements for heart health. But the secret to better circulation might be sitting in your kitchen right now, costing less than $1. Today, we're talking about raw onions and what they actually do to your blood within just a few hours of eating them. Stay with me, because what science has found about this ordinary vegetable is genuinely going to surprise you. And I'll tell you up front, there's one specific way most people eat onions that actually destroys the most important compound inside it. We'll get to that. Now here's what I want you to do right now. Hit the like button if you've ever been told by a doctor to watch your blood pressure or your heart health. Because this video is specifically for you, let me start with something that might genuinely shock you. Researchers at the University of Utah studied people who consumed roughly half a raw onion per day. Within 4 weeks, their blood pressure had dropped measurably. Not dramatically, but significantly, enough to matter clinically. And the mechanism isn't magic, it's chemistry. Specifically, 2 separate compounds working through 2 completely different pathways inside your body, and when you understand how they work, you'll never look at an onion the same way again. The first compound is called quercetin. Now, you might have heard that word before. Quercetin supplements are sold in health food stores for $15, $20, even $30 a bottle. Here's what's interesting. A single medium-sized yellow onion contains roughly the same amount of quercetin as a standard supplement capsule. Let that sit for a moment. So, what does quercetin actually do inside your blood vessels? Think of your arteries like a garden hose. When the hose is stiff and constricted, water has to push through with much more force. That's exactly what happens inside aging blood vessels. The walls stiffen. Blood has to work harder to move through, and your heart has to compensate by pumping harder. Over years and decades, that extra strain adds up in ways that matter enormously. Quercetin works on the inner lining of your blood vessels, a single, incredibly thin layer of cells called the endothelium. When quercetin reaches those cells, it triggers them to release a molecule called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide, this is the key part, acts like a chemical signal telling the muscles surrounding your blood vessels to relax. The vessel expands, blood flows more easily, pressure drops, that foggy feeling in your head, better blood flow to the brain, the heavy legs, better delivery of oxygen to the muscles, the cold hands, the small peripheral vessels opening up. It all connects. And it all starts with this one compound in an onion that most of us throw away or cook beyond recognition. If you've ever taken a blood pressure medication called a calcium channel blocker, you already know the concept from a pharmaceutical angle. It does something mechanistically similar. Onion does it more gently, through a pathway your body has used for thousands of years. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Because quercetin is only one half of the story. And I'd argue the second compound is actually more critical for people over 60. Let me explain why, and don't go anywhere, because this is the part most health videos never cover. Comment below right now, do you eat onions regularly? And if so, raw or cooked? Because the answer is going to matter a lot by the time we're done here. The second mechanism comes from the sulfur compounds in onions. Yes, the same compounds that make your eyes water when you cut one. That irritating chemical reaction is actually your first clue that something biologically powerful is being released into the air. And into your food. Here's what happens inside your body. These sulfur compounds, specifically a group called thiosulfinates, enter your bloodstream and interact with your platelets. Platelets are the tiny cell fragments responsible for blood clotting. Normally, that's essential you cut your finger. Platelets rush in and stop the bleeding. Good system. But in aging arteries that have been exposed to inflammation, high blood pressure, or high blood sugar over the years, platelets can start clumping together when they shouldn't, forming what doctors call microclots, or in more serious situations, full blockages. One study published in the journal Thrombosis Research found that onion sulfur compounds can reduce platelet aggregation, that's the technical term for clumping, by up to 30%. Stop for a second and think about what that means. 30% less tendency for your blood to form dangerous, uninvited clots. That is not a trivial number. That's the kind of reduction that, in clinical research, corresponds to meaningfully lower rates of cardiovascular events. Now, I want to be very clear. I am not telling you that onions replace medication your doctor has prescribed. Please hear that. What I am telling you is that the onion contains real, measurable, peer-reviewed compounds that work on the same biological systems your cardiovascular medicines are designed to protect. Food and medicine are not enemies. They operate on the same biology, and they can work together. And speaking of biology, here's something almost no one tells you. The timing of when these compounds become active inside the onion actually matters. A great deal. Stay with me. Because up next, I'm going to share the single most common mistake people make when eating onions that cuts their benefit by half. And it's not what you think. Let's talk about heat. This is where food science gets genuinely fascinating. Quercetin, the compound that triggers nitric oxide release and relaxes your blood vessels, is actually quite heat stable. You can saute an onion, roast it, bake it, even caramelize it, and the quercetin largely survives intact. The one thing to avoid is boiling onions in a large volume of water and then discarding that water. Because quercetin will leach out into the liquid. You pour it down the drain, and the benefit goes with it. But the sulfur compounds, the anti-clotting ones, are a completely different story. Heat destroys them. When you cook an onion until it's soft, sweet, and golden, those sulfur compounds are largely gone. This is why raw onion, even in small amounts, is uniquely valuable. A cooked onion delivers good quercetin. A raw onion delivers quercetin plus the full sulfur compound activity. Two different compounds, two different cooking rules. Now, you know both. And I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. I cannot eat raw onion. It's too strong. It comes back up on me for hours. My spouse won't let me near them. I hear you completely. And there are two simple techniques, real, food science-backed techniques, that make raw onions significantly more tolerable. We'll get there in just a moment, but first, the color question. Leave a comment if you've ever stood in the grocery store wondering whether it matters which color onion you buy. It does. The answer is simpler than you'd expect. Red onions and yellow onions contain significantly more quercetin and protective plant compounds than white onions. The general rule, the darker and more intensely pigmented the outer skin, the higher the concentration of beneficial compounds. White onions are milder in flavor and also milder in benefit. When you're shopping with cardiovascular health in mind, reach for red or yellow every single time. Here's a detail that's even more specific. The outermost edible layers of the onion, the ones closest to the papery dry skin, contain the highest concentration of quercetin. Most of us automatically peel those layers off because they look a bit dry or discolored. Try to keep as much of that outer edible flesh as you reasonably can. The dry, papery skin itself, that goes, but those first one or two firm layers underneath? They're the most nutritionally dense part of the entire onion. Now, here are those two techniques for making raw onion bearable, and they work. Technique 1, the 10-minute rule. After you slice or chop a raw onion, let it sit on your cutting board exposed to the air for 10 full minutes before you eat it or add it to anything. This is not just a cooking tip, it is biochemistry. When you cut an onion, you break open cells that were keeping certain compounds separate. This rupture triggers an enzyme called alliinase to activate. Alliinase begins converting precursor compounds in the onion into the beneficial sulfur molecules we've been discussing. But that enzymatic conversion takes time to reach its peak. 10 minutes of air exposure maximizes the process. If you chop an onion and immediately cook it, You destroy the enzyme before it finishes its work. Wait 10 minutes first, then cook it or eat it raw, and you lock in a significantly higher concentration of those beneficial compounds. Technique 2. The cold water soak. Slice your raw onion thin and submerge the slices in cold water for 15 minutes, then drain and pat dry. This draws out the harshest volatile compounds responsible for the sharp burning sensation and the breath that lingers. The quercetin and the beneficial sulfur compounds are far less water-soluble and remain in the onion tissue. You lose a very small amount of potency in exchange for a vegetable that's genuinely pleasant to eat on a salad. In a sandwich, alongside grilled fish. Most people find cold-soaked raw onion completely tolerable, even if they've never been able to eat onion raw before. Now, one more piece of the puzzle. And this one ties everything together. Almost no one talks about it, but it might be the most important factor in whether you actually absorb the benefits we've been discussing. Quercetin is what chemists call a fat-soluble compound. This means your gut can only absorb it efficiently when some dietary fat is present at the same time. If you eat raw onion on its own plain, as a snack, without anything else, your body absorbs a relatively small fraction of the quercetin available. If you eat that same raw onion drizzled with a small amount of olive oil or alongside avocado, walnuts, a piece of fatty fish, or even a small amount of cheese, the fat acts as a carrier, dramatically increasing the amount of quercetin that actually crosses your gut lining and enters your bloodstream. This is why the classic Mediterranean combination of raw onion, olive oil, lemon, and tomato on a simple salad is not just a flavor tradition passed down through generations. It is, whether those cooks knew it or not, a nutritionally optimized delivery system for cardiovascular protective compounds. The olive oil carries the quercetin. The lemon's vitamin C helps protect it from oxidation during digestion. And the onion provides both of the active compound families we've been talking about. Elegant, inexpensive, and backed by the same molecular biology that pharmaceutical researchers spend careers trying to replicate in pill form. If you're finding this genuinely useful today, do me a favor and share this video with someone in your family. A spouse, a sibling, a friend who mentions their blood pressure at every dinner. Because most people will never hear this information from their physician. Not because doctors don't care they do, but because there are only so many minutes in a 15-minute appointment. And nutritional biochemistry is rarely where the conversation goes. Let me give you something completely practical to walk away with today. Not a protocol, not a shopping list, just one simple habit. Try adding 2 to 3 tablespoons of finely chopped raw red or yellow onion to one meal per day. On a salad with an olive oil-based dressing, tucked into a sandwich or wrap. Stirred into a bowl of soup just before you serve it after it's off the heat so it stays raw. You don't need a large quantity. In this case, consistency over weeks and months matters more than quantity on any given day. Here's one specific thing you could make tonight. Slice half a red onion thin. Let it sit for 10 minutes. Combine it with diced tomato, a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, a squeeze of fresh lemon, a pinch of salt. Eat it alongside whatever you were already planning for dinner. That's it. That is the entire intervention, simple enough to repeat every single day. Grounded in the same mechanisms that multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical research programs have spent decades trying to understand and reproduce. Now here's something I want you to sit with. We've invested enormous resources as a society in understanding and treating cardiovascular disease. Sophisticated medications, complex surgical procedures, advanced imaging technology. All of it valuable, all of it important. But somewhere in the last few decades, we largely stopped talking about the foods that have actively supported cardiovascular health in human populations for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians fed onions to the workers who built the pyramids, believing they provided strength and endurance. Medieval European physicians prescribed onion preparations for weakness of the heart. And now we have the molecular biology to explain precisely why those ancient instincts were correct. This doesn't mean food fixes everything. It absolutely does not. It means food is not nothing. And for people who want to play an active, informed role in protecting their own health, not simply waiting for something to go wrong and then reacting. What you eat every day is one of the most powerful levers you have. One final note before we wrap up. This one is specifically for anyone currently taking blood-thinning medication warfarin, Eliquis, aspirin therapy, or similar. Because the sulfur compounds in onion do have genuine anti-platelet effects, it is worth mentioning to your doctor if you plan to eat onions in significant quantities consistently. Not because normal food amounts are dangerous, they aren't. And onion has been consumed safely alongside these medications by millions of people for decades. But because your physician should always have a complete picture of everything influencing your blood's behavior, this is a quick, simple conversation worth having at your next visit. All right? Let's bring it home. Here's everything you now know that most people sitting next to you don't. Onions contain two separate, scientifically validated cardiovascular active compounds, quercetin, which stimulates nitric oxide release and relaxes blood vessel walls, and sulfur compounds, which reduce platelet aggregation by up to 30%. To get the full benefit of both, choose red or yellow onions over white. Let cut onions rest in the air for 10 minutes before using them. Eat some raw when you can, or soak them in cold water first if the flavor is too strong. Pair them with a healthy fat for maximum quercetin absorption. And protect those outer edible layers. Don't peel away the most nutritious part of the vegetable. 1 ordinary ingredient, 4 simple rules. Real science, and it costs less than $1. If this video changed how you think about what's already in your kitchen, give it a like. It sounds small, but it genuinely helps this information reach more people who need it. If you have a specific question about something we covered, drop it in the comments. I read all of them, and I'll do my best to respond personally. And if you want more videos like this one, practical, science-grounded information about the foods that support healthy aging, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you there.